Hi, I'm Stephen Hawley Martin, author of Life After Death, Powerful Evidence You Will Never Die. Today I'm going to share a few key morsels of evidence from my book that may be enough to convince you that while your body will someday die, your consciousness will not, and in fact will likely continue to exist forever. Once you come to that realization, your fear of death will fall away, and you will see life differently. My hope is that this will prompt you to begin living life to the fullest and clear the way for you to reach your full potential. You know that death is the end is a relatively new idea, perhaps only 2 or at the most 300 years old. People in ancient times knew, and they took for granted, there was much more to life and existence than what we can see and experience with our 5 physical senses. They sensed they were surrounded by a non-dual, eternal world most could not see with their eyes. The idea that death is the end comes from materialist science, which, as far as I know, is still being taught in schools. Nevertheless, the key basic assumptions of materialist science have been disproven. Here's the one I will explode today. Materialism maintains that consciousness is created by the brain. There is a reason this false assumption is insidious, and that is that if it were true, then when your brain dies, your consciousness would be extinguished, and that would be the end of you. Research findings at the University of Virginia School of Medicine overwhelmingly contradict the materialist assumption. The findings tell us that the brain does not create consciousness, it does not create thought, and it does not store memories. Rather, the brain is a receiver of consciousness that can be compared to a cell phone, a television set, or radio receiver. The evidence falls into 4 categories. Number 1, recovery of lost consciousness in the moments or days prior to death among people who have been unconscious for prolonged periods of time. Number 2, complex consciousness ability in some people who have minimal brain tissue. Number 3, complex consciousness in near-death experiences when the brain is not functioning or is functioning at an extremely diminished level. Number 4, memories, particularly among young children, accurately recalling details of a past life. Concerning deathbed recovery of lost consciousness, one case invested by UVA I report on in my book involves a 42-year-old man in whom a malignant brain tumor developed that rapidly grew in size. He quickly became bedridden, blind in one eye, unable to communicate, incoherent, and bizarre in his behavior. He appeared unable to make any sense of his surroundings, and when his family members touched him, he would slap as though he was being annoyed by an insect. He eventually stopped sleeping and would talk deliriously throughout the night, making no sense. After several weeks of this, he suddenly appeared calm and began speaking coherently. He slept peacefully. The following morning, he remained completely clear and talked with his wife, discussing his imminent death for the first time. He then stopped speaking and died. This is but one of a number of examples. My own maternal grandmother, who suffered from a severe case of dementia and was unconscious for weeks before she died, came to and was perfectly lucid in the final hours before her death. It is as though her damaged brain prevented her from communicating. But when her brain finally began to die, her consciousness was released. UVA researchers also cite examples of complex consciousness having been demonstrated among people who have minimal brain tissue, stating that there are rare but surprising cases of people who seem to function normally, with normal intelligence and normal social function, despite having virtually no brain at all. In one case, published in 2007, a high school honor student who had been accepted for enrollment at Smith College underwent surgery after she was injured and knocked unconscious in an automobile accident. An x-ray of her head just before surgery revealed that she had no cerebral cortex at all. She had only a brain stem inside her skull. When the surgeon opened her skull to operate, that is exactly what he found. A brain stem, and that was all. Hers is not an isolated situation. There are dozens of cases of patients with hydrocephalitis, wherein as much as 95% of the brain is incapacitated due to an excess of cerebrospinal fluid, and yet many with that level of affliction have normal and even above average intelligence. Concerning near-death experiences, just about everyone is aware of accounts by those who have been clinically dead for a short period of time and then resuscitated. They typically have memories of vivid sensory imagery, an extremely clear memory of what happened. They often describe what they experienced as seemingly more real than everyday life. All of this occurs under conditions of drastically altered brain function, which currently accepted science would say is not possible. In one case reported on by UVA, a 9-year-old boy with meningitis had a near-death experience in which he saw several deceased relatives, including his sister, who told him he had to return to his body. As soon as he returned from death, he told his parents, who had been at his bedside for 36 hours during his ordeal. His father became very upset because his daughter was at college in a different state and was perfectly healthy as far as the father knew. The boy insisted that his sister had been sent him back, and had told him she had to remain. The father left the hospital, promising his wife he would call their daughter as soon as he got home. When he tried to call her, he learned that college officials had been trying to contact him and his wife all night to tell them the tragic news. Their daughter had been killed in an automobile accident around midnight. Concerning children's memories of past lives, there are more than 2,500 verified cases in the University of Virginia's files. Jim B. Tucker, who's a professor of psychiatry at the University of Virginia Medical School, whom I've personally interviewed twice, has written 2 books on the subject. His predecessor, the late Ian Stevenson, MD, who died in 2007, published more than half a dozen. What I've shared with you today is just a small sampling of what you'll find in my book, Life After Death, Powerful Evidence You Will Never Die. If you'd like to know more, I hope you'll get a copy. It comes in paperback and as a Kindle ebook. And be sure to get the second edition, as it contains much more evidence than the first. You'll find a link in the write-up below. It's an important book, I believe, because once you are convinced you are immortal, your approach to life and your attitude will change for the better. You'll be free to enjoy each moment. It has certainly done that for me, and much, much more.